Rod Sawford, former member for Port Adelaide, welcome.
Thank you.
Can Labor win with Julia Gillard as leader?
I don't think so. I think the polls are just too drastic. There was a telling poll last week from Nielsen, excuse me, that said under Kevin Rudd it would be a 50-50 proposition. Now that's what the election should be.
Do you think that Labor is a 50-50 proposition with Kevin Rudd?
Yes.
If that's the case, could you explain to us why an occasionally awkward Queenslander who speaks in bureaucratese would be more appealing to your former electorate than a woman who grew up in Adelaide?
There is another factor in this election that I don't think people have identified. Well, certainly the Nielsen poll identified, is an angst factor. There was an angst factor in 1974 and 1984 against the coalition, and this is when the Hawke government and the Whitlam government survived. There is an angst factor out there now, and it's against the faceless men of the Labor Party.
So, but why is so Julia Gillard is associated with that? Is that
Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, the faceless men, many of them who were only in Canberra for 25 seconds, Bill Shorten and Don Farrell and Mark Arbib and David Feeney and others, they made a decision to remove a Prime Minister. Now, I can tell you, out there in the electorate, they are very angry about that. And this is a question of unfinished business, unresolved anger, and that's why the Nielsen poll is pointing to a chance, a 50-50 chance, with Kevin Rudd.
One normally expects people to be rational, even politicians.
Yes.
There was no reluctance, apparently, to get rid of Kevin Rudd. Why, when it's a question of survival, does there appear to be this reluctance to go back?
Well, I think the people who removed him in the first place made a huge mistake. The caucus doesn't have a collective view, in my view. It's a bit weak. So is the ministry. If they were unhappy with Kevin Rudd, he should have been fronted up, the finger should have been put in his chest, and it should have been explained, and he should have been asked to redeem his ways. I don't think that was done. They just decided to remove him. Well, that was a pretty silly thing. And people out there, it's my feedback, whether you're in, I was in Beechworth a couple of months ago, in Sophie Mirabella's seat, which is a Liberal seat. I can tell you it was almost a mirror feeling of my own seat at Port Adelaide. People are angry at what happened to Kevin Rudd, and they want it remedied.
And they want to be the ones, this is the crucial point,
Yes.
They want to be the ones who do it.
The people are always right. The people always get federal elections right, and they want to get it right again. Now, this doesn't mean that Kevin will win, that Labor will win under Kevin, but they are a 50-50 chance, which is what the Nielsen poll said, and which is what I believe.
Can you go back, or can we come back to what you were talking of beforehand? And this is a formula that was given to you by your grandfather as to why one side wins over another. Explain that.
Well, in 1961, I was 17. Politics was always a big deal in my family. And my father was a wharf labourer. My grandfather was a night watchman for a local oil company. A bet started at the beginning of the campaign, £5. A lot of money in those days, in 1961. It went to £10, and then on the election night, my father was so convinced that Labor would win, he put a week's wages on it, £20. My grandfather tipped Menzies to win, and he tipped him to win by 1 seat. Now, about a fortnight later, I asked him, how did you do that? And he told me 4 factors. He said he didn't care about state elections and he didn't care about local government. He cared very much about national elections around the world, because this formula works in England, it works in Canada, it works in New Zealand, works in Taiwan, works in Israel, it works everywhere. At a national level, it's always the economy. Now, the economy is defined with 3 attributes. 1, interest rates. If they go down from the previous election, as they have in this case, that's a good thing for the government. If unemployment rate goes up, which they have this time, that's a bad thing for the government. That's a good thing for the coalition. And if the inflation rate, that's the key this time, what is it? Now, up to 2004, you could tell straight away. You can't anymore.
Because it's not done until after the election.
That's right. It's a little bit like unemployment was in 1993. The OECD changed the method of measuring unemployment. Now it's sort of settled down into a figure. There is a 4th factor, and it's called my grandfather called it the peed off factor, the PO factor. I call it the angst factor. In 1974, the coalition pushed a Labor government which had been elected by the people unnecessarily to a short election within 18 months. The people punished the coalition and returned the Whitlam government. They did the same thing in 1984. They punished the coalition and returned the government. This time, the public, I believe, are really angry at unknown people who have removed a Prime Minister they believe illegitimately. Too soon. That was done in June the 24th, almost a year ago, and the election was held in August. So there wasn't time and so you finish up with a hung parliament, which is what the economic indicators meant.
But if I'm understanding you correctly, the chance for Labor is, if inflation is a bit lower, that helps.
Yes.
But if they can address the angst factor, and only Labor can do it, by going back to Kevin Rudd, then at least they have that 50-50 chance. Is that how
That's
the formula
my view.
plays out?
It's unresolved anger. And people out there want to believe that they are the ones who determine who is the government. Now, you and I both know that they only vote for an individual member, but they do vote for the government.
We're promised leadership. And I understand what you're saying. It's a Westminster system.
Yep.
There are mechanics, but things work in people's head in a particular way. An election's a social contract.
Yes,
and
it is.
And it's drawn up on the basis of each party promises that we choose the leader.
Yes.
Destroy it at your peril.
That's right. And that's why the Labor Party they'll get creamed, and they may in fact cause terminal damage to the Labor Party by losing so many people that they won't recover.
Rod Sawford, a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Simon.